All right, my friends, welcome to another special bonus episode here at the Red Delta Project podcast, taking a fundamental approach to fitness to give you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. Today, once again, I have my mentor, my friend, and my comrade here, Al Kavadlo, here on the podcast. We are going to be discussing one of the most important aspects of fitness that is often neglected for people, especially as they get older, and can really make or break a lot of your results, especially for those who want to live healthier, who want to have less pain, better performance, and just simply a better quality of life. We're talking, of course, about the importance of mobility training. And Al has just released a brand new ebook called Mobility Man, which I've read several times, and we're going to be discussing that and the unique approaches and why it's different from most other type of super hyper yoga based mobility training out there that's much simpler and more practical for faster and more effective results. So I'm going to shut up now. Al, welcome once again to the Red Delta Project podcast.
Hey, Matt. And hey, everybody who's listening. It's great to be back.
All right. Well, let's start off with a little bit of the genesis of this idea, because I think a lot of times mobility training has a lot of myths surrounding it and a lot of kind of stigmas about who should do it, why we should do it, what are the benefits that we get from it. And this book helps to really break down a lot of what the real benefits are, how we really go about doing it in a practical way. So what gave you the idea for creating this sort of a program?
Well, I've been doing strength training most of my life. Since I was 13. I'm 43 now, so that's over 30 years of strength training. And in the beginning, I did a little bit of calisthenics. People know me now, if they know me at all, they know me for calisthenics. But I pretty much just did calisthenics to supplement my weight training. And in my mid-20s, I got a real eye-opening experience when I took my first yoga class. And I thought, what a lot of, macho kind of guys think, young men, yoga, this is kind of a wimpy thing. I only took it because I worked at the gym where they gave it. And my manager suggested, hey, you should take some of the classes here because you might meet some people and get some more clients out of it. So I wasn't really going into it with an open mind to yoga, but it really humbled me and it really challenged me and it was fun and I liked it. And that was sort of the beginning of my mobility training. And now that I am in my 40s, I'm meeting more and more guys, in many cases, who've been exercising for many, many years. They're not new to fitness. But as they're getting older, that lack of mobility is presenting more of a problem for them and becoming an issue. And this is something that a lot of my clientele needs now. So that was the impetus for it.
Yeah, and I fully agree. Like you, I'm almost 45 now myself, and I've always struggled a lot with mobility training. And as a result, I was always like, it's not really my thing. It's not something I focus on. I'm fine if I don't really focus that much on it. And especially over the past 5 years or so, I've had just a lot of these nagging aches and pains that have been creeping up and getting persistent and worse. I'm like, well, I can do this strength exercise and I'm seeing chiropractors and stuff, which all helped. But the thing that really made such a big difference for me was just taking mobility a little tiny bit more seriously. And a lot of that stuff just kind of went away, not overnight, but it really made a big difference, not only in how little pain I had, but also had great carryover into my strength training. So my strength training became a lot more effective as well. Did you notice that was the case too, where it had a lot of spillover to performance and other aspects?
Absolutely. Strength and mobility are intimately connected. And to think otherwise is over compartmentalizing things, because if you can't move through a full range of motion, then you obviously can't build strength through a full range of motion. And everybody knows those half reppers or quarter reppers at the gym, right? Who are doing bench press with a really, really tiny range of motion, or doing squats but only going partially down. I mean, that's exactly the type of thing I'm talking about. If you can only squat a quarter of the way down, you're not really functionally strong. And beyond that, a lot of guys, especially as they get older, tend to overtrain in terms of strength. And I find if you're the type of person who likes to train every day or close to every day, and you're over 40 and you're doing strength training every day and not doing mobility work, that's a recipe for really messing yourself up. You have to balance it out more. You can get away with that in your 20s, that strength training 5 days a week with no mobility. But I don't think you can get away with it as much when you get older.
I humbly, fully agree with that one, because I had that exact same attitude myself. And one of the things I noticed was it wasn't the mobility that I was thinking about, because I come from a martial arts background. So for me, a lot of mobility training was, can you do a split? Can you do a front split sort of thing? Can you do these types of big range of motion, fancy Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of techniques? And one of the things I love about the techniques in your book is they address a lot of the areas that kind of, I wouldn't say get neglected, but need a little bit more attention as we've spent more of our years sitting hunched over with repetitive motions, with classic strength training motions and stuff. And that was the stuff that made the biggest difference for me, like the mountain pose that you covered, the deep squat that you covered. This is not the type of mobility training that requires a lot of fancy equipment or a lot of really in-depth like skills, like really advanced yoga poses. This is stuff that I can do just finding a few minutes during the day as I'm standing up from a desk, or just kind of microwaving a burrito or something like that. And boy, does it make a big difference. What made you decide to focus on this type of mobility training that can be so practical and efficient?
Well, first off, anyone who knows anything about me knows that I'm a minimalist when it comes to my training. So of course, if I'm going to make a mobility program, it's not going to involve a whole lot of equipment. And, my audience has kind of grown up with me over the years. I have a lot of people, not just my audience, my clients, who've been my personal training clients for over a decade. And I'm seeing so many of these. I've kind of become a specialist in guys over 40 because, well, I used to specialize in younger guys, but we all got older together. So I've seen a lot of these things happen to a lot of people, and I had to kind of make a lot of the same modifications with people. And now I'm doing it more proactively. And as far as the program, I like what you said, that it's stuff that you can integrate into your life easily, because a lot of programs are great in theory, but if they're overly complicated, they're overly time consuming, you won't actually do it. So that was a really big thing with me when putting this together, was not just having a hypothetical program, but really having something that's pragmatic that people can apply in their day-to-day life.
Absolutely. It's the whole, like, this is what I base most everything I do on, is low cost, high reward. Like, what's the thing that can take a small amount of time and energy and effort, but it still produces big outcomes, big rewards that are really apparent and very, very self-evident. It's not gonna, these are not the moves where you're gonna say, well, I think it might be doing something kind of, sort of, maybe. It's like, no, in a week of doing some of this stuff, I'm like, my back feels really, really good. I just did a set of pull-ups, or a few sets of pull-ups before our podcast here. And it's like, wow, I'm getting so much more range in my shoulders now. And it's carrying over because my biceps are working a lot better. My elbows don't have as much stress and tendon issues anymore that they did. The lat activation is just off the charts. And if you had told me 5 years ago, it's like, yeah, the key to better pull-ups is this mobility exercise, I would have thought you were crazy. It's like, no, you need weighted pull-ups, you need harder pull-ups. What is the pull-up routine? It's like, no, if you can have a little bit more mobility to use the muscles more effectively, everything levels up. And it's such a simple aspect to incorporate that there's no reason not to.
Most people are familiar with the term newbie gains. Whenever you start doing a kind of training you haven't done before, that's when you can make that huge growth, that nothing to something. And people who are new to strength training experience the same thing. It's like, whoa, on day 1, I can only do 2 push-ups. And by day 10, I can do 20 push-ups, because you've woken something that was already in you and wanting to come out. And the same thing happens with mobility training. Guys who don't do it at all, and women too, my target audience is men, but people ask me that a lot. Like, can women do this? And yeah, of course women can do this. But people who go from not doing any mobility training to doing some mobility training, it's that same thing. In the beginning, it just opens up the floodgates. And then, of course, you hit that plateau, and then it takes a lot more dedication and time and patience to really get to the next level. But even if people never get to the next level, just making that little shift is going to, like you said, it's going to help their strength training. And to be clear, you also have to be strong to be good at pull-ups. You can't just be mobile but there are many pieces to the puzzle. And if people are only focusing on one aspect of it for a very, very long time, and then suddenly they come at it from a different angle, it opens up a whole new field of opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very refreshing take because, especially as we're getting older in the world of not just biological age, but also our training age, it's inevitable that we start looking for, okay, what's the next thing that I'm going to start incorporating that's going to make a difference? Because as you said, you have those newbie gains, and for maybe several months or even a few years, you're kind of trucking along. But one of the things that is kind of I wouldn't say it's a secret, but that people like to sweep under the rug about fitness in general is that once you've gone beyond those initial stages, your progress is going to be like chipping away at a stone, and you're going to make progress over time, but it's just not going to be like it was when you were younger or having the
Absolutely.
first, several years of your training career. So I think a lot of us are looking for, okay, what's that next thing that's going to give me a little bit of a new spurt forward, a jump forward? And I really do believe this is one of those things, is adding some of that mobility is going to breathe a lot of new life into all of your strength training techniques, especially when it comes to mobility in your hips and your back.
Absolutely. And the other thing about putting this program together that I think makes it unique, and you touched upon this earlier, and I wanted to come back to it, is you mentioned martial arts and how that has a certain style and type of training for flexibility. And we were talking about yoga before, and yoga has its own way of approaching things. And then there's many schools of flexibility. There's a lot of people right now, it's very hot to talk about this active range of motion, things where you aren't using any external object to get you deeper into a stretch. And I'm a fan of that too. And some people will go as far as to decry traditional, splits training or some of the yoga stuff. It's like, that's not really going to make you flexible because it's passive. And I'm a big believer that all of these things have their place. And I've personally, over the years, done so many different things and tried so many different things. And this program is kind of a combination of different techniques that I've picked up from different styles and kind of put them together in my own unique way. And it's just what I've always done, Matt, is share what works for me. I do things, I say, you know what, this is no good, this is good, this is what I think about this. Oh, how come more people aren't doing that? And then I tell people about it, and if people agree and it helps them, great. Some people say, you know what, not necessarily about this program, but just about, anything I say to anyone online especially, there's going to be people who disagree with you, and that's cool too. I'm just saying, hey man, this is my take on things. This is my experience. These are my observations.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we can only give what we have. You can't pour from an empty cup. So as coaches and trainers, we're giving of ourselves what we have received and received a lot of benefit from. And I've always appreciated your approaches because they're so practical. It's not very fancy, overly complicated stuff. This is the stuff that is going to make potentially the biggest impact for the cost invested. And these movements, as I'm going through these and practicing them and implying them, it's like, boy, you only need one of these techniques to hit for it to make a difference. You don't need a mobility across 100 different ways. You just need one or two improvements in mobility in a couple of areas, and it's a total game changer as far as mobility, obviously, but your performance, aches and pains, stress on the body, posture, how you're moving, how you're commanding yourself in your workouts, as well as your everyday life. It's amazing what difference just one or two of these techniques can make. And there's quite a few in this book. How many did you include in general?
There are, I think, about 35 or 36 different exercises in here. And, I really made a point to keep it as brief as I could. And something that I talk about in the intro of the book is it's easy to overwhelm people because there's a million variations out there. And part of me, when I started putting it together, wanted to include everything I've ever done and liked. And I said, wait a minute, I got to distill this down to the most essential universal principles Otherwise, like I was saying earlier, people won't be able to absorb it and apply it and actually stick to it. So it was a real challenge to try to keep it as simple and minimalistic as I could. And it's the same thing that you and I believe about strength training. You don't need a million esoteric exercises. You need to focus on basic movements and really hone them and practice them and dig into the subtleties and details of them and refine them. And that is how you progress over time. It's like the analogy you said of chipping away at that stone.
Yep, I love it. And it's such a characteristic of the advanced coaches out there and the advanced trainers is the individuals who don't have a seemingly complicated program. Like I remember when combat conditioning came out, and Paul Wade, of course, talks about his big six, and people are like, 6 moves? You got to be kidding me. And now looking back, it's like, yeah, because he was that much more of an advanced coach. Because a lot of other bodyweight books, myself included, the second book I ever put out, I'm like, I'm going to put in 100 different exercises and 1,000 different of this and everything. And looking back, and I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Because it's so hard to apply. But if you can get just a couple of basic movements that can improve and progress on a regular basis, that can make such a big difference. It's mind-blowing. And I really appreciate your emphasis on that sort of simplicity and directness towards what people really need versus what we just want to be fancy and stuff a book full of different things in a way to falsely add value.
You and I are a lot alike in that regard. When I look back on my older books, there is so much I wouldn't have included if I were to do them now. And I'm proud of those books. And that's how you get better at things, is by doing more of them. But I think exactly what you said. I was so maybe insecure that I felt like I need to just cram everything in here or people aren't going to like it. And those books were well received. But I think that the material I've put out in the last few years, really the first book that I put together that I really felt like I got this right was Get Strong, which I co-authored with my brother Danny. And that was, I had already done 4 other books, and Danny had already done 3 other books before we got one. And that one, we're like, we finally didn't overdo it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's fun to watch these sorts of progressions over time of training styles and where training and the books and the information out there comes about. Because especially now, we live in this culture of instant gratification and shorter attention spans. I remember I used to make YouTube videos that were 5-8 minutes long, and people were like, this is great. And then pretty soon people were saying this is too long. And now I could put out a TikTok that's 30 seconds and they're like, you talk too much. This is too long. Like, I'm like,
I know, what the hell are we doing here with this long form podcast, right?
Exactly. It's like, dear Lord. So this simple approach that you've taken with this book and the entire mobility thing, because it's simple, but it's also very well thought out, because you've got 3 routines in here, and the way the movements build on each other is extremely well thought out. Because it's not just, okay, here's the stretch, let's go and do stuff. There's a very methodical approach to how these are laid out. And I really appreciate it also. You put in a lot more detail on how are you doing the stretch? Because like with strength training, a lot of people are like, I can do push-ups. Like, you just get down on the floor and you push yourself up. What's the big deal? But the details and the nuance to your breathing, your posture, where are you focusing your attention? That's the stuff that makes a big difference from meh progress to, oh, wow, I really feel this working. And I appreciated that attention to detail, but it's not overwhelming either. It's like, here's 3 things to think about in this, and that can do a lot right there.
I really appreciate hearing that. And I think you, as a coach who's written extensively, probably appreciate that about this more than the average person might. Although I think the average person is on a sublime level going to get all that, but they're not actively going to be thinking about it when they look at the book. But that aside, it's harder and takes longer to write a shorter book. And that's something that really has been messing with my head these last few years, these last few things. When I made those earlier books, if I had spent more time editing things out, that would have taken longer and it would have made them better. And that's what I did with this program. It's there's a famous Bruce Lee quote. I think it goes something like, hack away at the unessential It's a daily decrease, not a daily increase. And I almost was going to put that quote at the beginning of this book. And then I think, wait a minute, this quote is asking to be edited out. It's saying a hack away. So I took it out. I had to follow the advice in the quote. But that is what I think you have to do when you're putting together a program or a book or anything of that nature, because you want the person to really be able to absorb it. And to your point about there's that balance in this book of giving a lot of detail, but not an overwhelming amount. And that was something that I really put things in, took them out. I mean, you put these books together. It's a long, arduous process.
Yeah.
And you have to really be into what you're doing. People probably ask you, because they ask me a lot, oh, I want to write a book. Oh, I'm starting a book. Oh, how do you do it? How do you write a book? And I'm like, you have to be completely obsessed with it for months. It has to be all consuming in your mind. And any second you get to sit down and work on it, you have to do that. And if you're not doing that, you'll never finish it.
Oh, it's 100%
And
true.
that's what I've been doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've just started one of my biggest, most ambitious books to date. And people are like, oh, okay, so this, and I've got an ambitious deadline to it. And they're like, I can't believe you're going to make this book so quickly. I'm like, quickly? I've been obsessed about this for the past 5 years. Like, it's been collecting.
Right, there's the gestation period in your mind before you even sit down to write it. Right, that goes on for years first.
Exactly. So it's like, this is, I'll write it, I'll put it out, and people are like, wow, that was so quick. I'm like, this was not quick. Believe me, it took you, if you knew how much work went into this sort of thing, to make something especially simpler. Is that, who said it? Abraham Lincoln or somebody said something effective like, oh, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Same thing.
That's been attributed to a lot of different people, that quote.
I've
heard Mark
so,
Twain.
Yeah.
I've heard, a few other people. Abe Lincoln. Who knows who really said it first, but it's a good line.
Mm-hmm. So how do we get over the criticism, especially for people who are just getting into something and they see a program that is simple and direct like this, that is very efficient, and their initial perspective is, there doesn't seem to be much here. It can't be very good. I need something complicated. Because I think we all fall into that, especially when we're beginners. How can we kind of transcend that and provide more evidence to the value of, no, less is more in this case?
Well, I think what we were just discussing is worth saying, and that's why I spend a couple pages at the beginning of the book explaining that. But I think you have to have the confidence and just know that the material is good. And put that out there and say, look, try it. Mm-hmm. See for yourself. Yeah. And I think that's something that's taken me a long time to get to that point in my career. And I guess I've been there for a little while now. But to maintain the humility to know that I don't know everything, and to be open-minded to still learn things and to still grow, but to understand that I've done this with a lot of people over the years, and I kind of have a pretty good idea of the generally speaking, what's going to work and what's not going to work. And of course, that's why I offer personal training also, because sometimes people do need individual guidance because their situation is a little bit unique.
When we're starting off too, we rush to the complicated, the overly expended. And, in the financial world, one of the most basic tenets of financial well-being and independence is live within your means. And I've applied that very much towards training and fitness as well, of, okay, yeah, maybe you can work out 3 hours a day. Maybe you can put all of your time and energy and effort into trying to make things perfect. But I usually recommend people, it's like, yeah, but if you have 3 hours a day, try working out for 20 minutes, half an hour, 10 minutes or whatnot. We just need to get the ball rolling and get things moving. Because when we live within our means, that gives us so much more of a staying power and consistency with what we're doing. And I appreciate your approaches, especially with this mobility program, because it makes it so much easier to do that. Is you don't need to stretch out for, a long period of time. Like, yeah, okay, if you can do an hour of mobility a day, awesome, great. But if it's not happening, that's perfectly fine too. It can still be very worthwhile, even if it's just for 5 minutes, and you provide tools to still make something happen in even that amount of resources.
A lot of people have the all or nothing approach, and then there's also the idea of the sunk cost fallacy, that but I'm already 45 and I'm all beat up, it's too late. It's like, well, you're only going to get more beat up as you get older, so you might as well at least start moving back in the other direction rather than continuing down this path just because you've been on it for so long. And that's the hardest part for people, is making that U-turn, and starting. Once you're moving in the other direction, it gets easier, but that turnaround is really brutal for people.
So how would you go about helping people to make that U-turn? Like, let's say, okay, I've been sedentary, been out of shape, I'm tight, I'm stiff. I know I need to make a change, but I'm not sure where to start. What do I do? How do I even start to tackle this?
I mean, if they're even asking that question, then that's a good starting point, because it means they're willing to acknowledge there's a problem. And that's the first step to fixing anything. You were saying the tenets of finance apply to fitness. All of this stuff applies to everything. When you know the way in one thing, you see the way in all things. And that's not my line. That's an old paraphrasing of something.
I'm gonna say that's a good one. I'm gonna write that one down somewhere.
But it's true. So you have to just have common sense about the way that you approach things, and you have to be able to look at a situation. I always have clients who are blown away by how much I know about fitness or how I'm able to help them. And I say to them, hey, don't you know a lot about, taxes or being a doctor or being a teacher or whatever it is that you do? It's like, this is my job. This is my career. This is what I've invested my time in for like my whole life. I would hope I know a couple of things about it. So people sometimes forget that the ways that they did well in the things that they're good at, they have to do that with this too.
I like those perspectives, just branching out, applying principles from one area to another, because it's not separate. It's all an integrated component of life. Mobility is integrated with strength with health with longevity, with quality of life with quality of other aspects of our life and everything. And it's just these ripple effects that build onto each other. So we're talking about mobility in the shoulders, mobility in the hips and stuff. And it seems like a very focused attention on, hip mobility is a good thing. But what we're really talking about here are creating ripple effects that influence and branch out across so many other areas of our life in simple ways. And now, we're in January, early January, we're talking about change. We're talking about New Year's resolutions and stuff. And this is the perfect time to be revisiting what are simple things you can do to make a big difference. And this is a good way to get started with that.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm fascinated by this paradox, how sometimes one thing can be true and the opposite thing can also be true, and it doesn't mean that one isn't true anymore. So this idea that mobility is going to improve your strength seems to people like, but wouldn't getting more mobility, isn't that less time that you can't spend strength training? It's like, well, yes, that's true, but also the opposite is true. And we love to compartmentalize things. We love to say, this is flexibility training, this is strength training, this is a weight loss thing, this is a energy boosting thing, this is a better sleep thing. But like you said, they're all so deeply interconnected. And on one level, we could say it's silly to try to compartmentalize these things because you have to have a holistic approach. And that's true. But we can also say, well, sometimes you do have to just focus on your mobility, and that's going to affect the big picture. And those two ideas seem to be in contrast to one another. And on one level they are, but that's what's paradoxical about it.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating take to it. And one of the things that I've noticed that, especially with mobility, is, when we're looking at, I want to get stronger, or I want to build muscle, I want to lose weight or whatnot, we tend to get very focused in our attention in one aspect of it. But oftentimes focusing so much on how much do I lift or how many push-ups can I do, that's going to take you so far. And the thing that's holding you back, that's creating friction from advancing that, is something so totally different that you're not even paying attention to it. Like the person who wants to build strength, mobility can be a big component that's going to take the brakes off of that. Or it could be the other way around, where it's like, I just can't get my hips to be more open. I can't get more mobile. It's like, what about strengthening those hips? Because I've noticed that a muscle that is tight is usually also fairly weak. So it's all this synergistic approach. And the more we get so fixated on, I just need to do this one thing better, the more we become blind to the other avenues of opportunity that we're ignoring, that actually that's what you need to focus on.
Well, it's something I touch upon in the book also, is this idea that pain in one part of the body may be starting somewhere else. If you've got tight hip flexors, the hip flexor may not be the only thing you need to address. Your hamstrings could be affecting that too. If you've got pain in your neck, that could be emanating from your spine. That could be coming from all sorts of, in the shoulder impingement, it could make its way into the neck. So it's important to, yes, focus on our problem areas, but also have that holistic view. And that's that inherent contradiction I was talking about earlier. And that comes up in so many things in life. It's we want to think things are black and white because it's simpler to think of the world that way, but it's really not. And I'm fascinated by this idea across, all aspects of life. It's true.
Yeah. I think in the back of our minds, or at least subliminally, we all go through life going, what am I missing? Like there's something I'm still missing. There's a component or a piece of the puzzle that I don't have yet. And the theory I've developed over time is that a lot of times people try gimmicks or they try fads and stuff like that. And coaches like us often are like, oh, everybody wants a shortcut. Everybody wants an easier pill or something like that. And it's like, I think a lot of it is just people are looking for, what am I missing here? And a lot of times, if you look at the advertisements and the gimmicky,
they're playing right into it.
Yeah, it's like
marketers know that people think like that and they take advantage of it.
Exactly. But when we take more of a holistic approach of the basic fundamentals like mobility and stuff, it's usually those are the things that are missing. Like if I'm trying to build muscle and strength, no, it's not going to be some one weird trick you do in your workout or anything. It's just, what are the other fundamental aspects of your health and fitness that you're neglecting? It's like, oh, I'm doing tons of cardio and stuff, I can't lose weight. I'm like, what's your diet look like? What's your sleep look like? And other aspects that may not seem related, but they are incredibly related as well.
Yeah. And it's often hard for people to be objective. And I think as trainers and coaches, that's often the role that we have to play, is as delicately as possible, telling people the hard truth that they may not really want to hear or see, and forcing them to confront it in a way that's not demeaning to them or insulting to them, but inspiring and maybe encouraging.
Yeah. It's helpful to remember that we all struggle with this stuff. Like sometimes, we all post our best selves on social media. We all post, our best days and our best events and everything. But the fact is, we all have the same struggles to some degree in life. We all struggle to motivate ourselves to work out from time to time. We all struggle to figure out, should I do this workout or that kind of workout and stuff. And we like to put this face on to the world, especially with social media, of, oh, I know what I'm doing. I've got it all figured out. But I'll be the first to tell you, it's like, I'm still trying to figure this stuff out as much as the next guy out there. I may know a little bit more now just because I've been obsessed with it for 20 years, but that doesn't mean that I haven't gotten rid of the struggle and the challenge, because it's always going to be there.
And that's that same yearning that's always looking for, what am I missing? What more can I be doing? It's a delicate thing. It's that same paradox, because that yearning is what makes us do things. It's what makes us be creative. It's what makes us challenge ourselves. But it's also what causes us to wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and panic. So it's a double-edged sword. Without it, nobody would ever do anything.
when you bring it to the surface of the conscious mind, it's like, well, yeah, this is obvious, but it's one of the most fundamental subliminal driving factors in our day-to-day life. And if we're not bringing it to the surface and being aware of it, then it's just kind of going on autopilot. And then we wake up 5 years later and you're like, why is my back hurt? Why are my shoulders so stiff? How come I can't do this anymore? And
there's a lot of people, Matt, and I guess it's a lot of people our age and older for the most part who feel this way, that what you're talking about is the biggest problem in the world and in our society now, is that people aren't challenged enough and people don't have that desire to find something new, more challenging, more useful. People are too content. Life is too easy. Everyone is just sitting around, eating, staring at a screen, having things delivered to them, not actually interacting with the world and challenging themselves and broadening their horizons enough. Mm-hmm. And it's more complicated than that. I don't mean to sound like a curmudgeon-y old fart, but that, whatever that is, that thing inside of people, because they're not challenging themselves, people are falling into depression. People are getting addicted to all sorts of new and dangerous pharmaceuticals and other drugs. And we need to do new things in life. We need to embark on journeys.
I've been listening to, you familiar with the Earl Nightingale?
I've heard the name, but I don't know his work well.
Yeah, very, very classic self-development improvement thing. Like it's pretty old stuff, because a lot of his older stuff, you listen to it, it's like, you could make as much as $6,000 a year. Imagine that. It's like, wow, okay, this is not recent.
That used to be a lot of money.
Yeah, I know, right? But one of the things he said that really stuck with me was his definition of success is that success is the progressive pursuit of a worthy ideal. So in his mind, he's like, successful individuals are anybody who wakes up in the morning and they're like, I'm trying to improve and pursue something that's a worthy ideal to them. It doesn't matter what station they have in life. It's just, I'm trying to improve. Versus the individual who is, quote, failing, feels like they're failing, is the individual who, even though they seemingly on paper have everything going for them, they're sitting back and saying, I'm just taking my foot off the gas. I'm not pursuing anything. I'm not trying to grow or develop or improve anything. And that's how, again, you get some people who they seemingly have everything and they're so miserable because they're not working towards something that they value. But the individual who wakes up and they're like, I've got a mission, I've got something I'm working towards, they're feeling like they've got a degree of success in life, even if on paper it doesn't look like it, but they feel like they're more successful because of that. And again, like you said, new things, learning new things, implying new things, expanding your approaches to however you're doing anything is a great way to do that.
Well, you know something, Matt? There's people who might be listening, and they're probably not still listening at this point if they're thinking this, but there may have been people listening who are thinking, Al's just here. He just wants to plug his book. He just wants to make money. And of course, that's true. I do want to plug my book. I think it's a good book. I think it'll help anyone who reads it. But I love talking to you. And this is an enjoyable, enriching conversation. And that's the real reason I'm doing it. And I think too many people get too focused on pursuing success and not pursuing things that genuinely interest them. And I think, like you said, when you are mentally stimulated and engaged and doing things that are meaningful to you, that's success. So I think this was a successful podcast, even if no one buys the book because of it. But I hope a few people will.
And my friends listening, seriously, like, I'm not a mobility guy. I've never taken this stuff seriously. I've never had really any interest in it and stuff. And I'm not just saying this because I enjoyed the book, but get this book. Seriously, if you read one book on improving your quality of life, your health, your mobility, all the things that can happen from that progressive ripple effect and stuff, this is the one book you should read. If you've got any fitness goals for 2023, this book should be part of your plan. You can find it down below in the description. There's links down below, as well as other resources that Al is providing for you very generously, of course. And don't forget, check out his Instagram, which is also down below, because he's putting a lot of great stuff out there, folks. And you're really missing out if you're not getting that daily dose of Al Kavadlo, because Al, you just moved down to Florida a couple of years ago, correct?
It hasn't even been 1 year yet.
Hasn't even been 1 year. Oh my gosh.
Like
Yeah.
it's been almost a year.
All right, right. So, I mean, boy, you talk about a big life-changing event, is moving to a very different state, very different environment. And it's been an absolute joy to watch you grow and thrive in this new environment with, of course, Grace and your family and everything. Everybody's doing so well and happy. I'm just so happy for you guys and sharing your wealth with the rest of us. And it's much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Well, that is incredibly nice to hear and very kind of you to say. And I really appreciate that, Matt. And right back at you.
Very
If
good.
anyone's listening and they're not already following you on Instagram, they should follow you too.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So, yes, folks, please do check out Al's book down below. Again, highly, highly recommended. Definitely one of the most comprehensive ways for practical real life mobility training. And Al, any parting words of wisdom for everybody?
Hey, we're working out.
All right, folks. Thank you very much for listening. And I will talk to you folks next time. Till then, be fit and live free.